The universe had long since accepted a brutal truth. Peace was only a pause between extinctions. For thousands of years, the stars whispered of empires that rose and fell with the same rhythm as a dying heartbeat. Entire species came into power, burning like fire through the darkness, only to vanish into ash when something more terrifying emerged. Fear was the only constant. Every civilization that reached space learned to watch the shadows, learned to speak softly, and never make the mistake of believing they were safe. Because something always came next. Something worse. The Varn were the apex predators for a time. Black-scaled and cold-blooded, they ruled with silence and precision. No one even heard their fleets until it was too late. Then came the Drothi, burning whole atmospheres with plasma storms, replacing silence with the sound of screaming air. And after them, the Maikar. The Maikar didn't conquer planets, they consumed them. Left behind nothing but dust and memories that broke the mind. Every species feared every other. The galaxy was a web of uneasy truces, silent cold wars, and backroom whispers soaked in paranoia. Treaties were signed not out of hope but terror. And still, in the back of every mind, there was the question no one dared ask aloud. What comes next? The first reports didn't even register. A drifting vessel here. A mining outpost there. Static on comms, gone without explanation. The kind of incidents that happened all the time in the outer sectors. Brush it off, send someone to log it, forget it. Until one day, a Varn scout ship docked at a neutral station, its hull half melted, its crew barely coherent. "They're not like the others," the captain rasped. His mouth bled as he spoke, his voice filled with something worse than pain, confusion. "We fired first. They didn't run. They laughed." The footage he brought with him was corrupted, but fragments remained. One showed a small craft, primitive in design, full of flaws, but it moved like a predator that had just caught a scent. Another clip showed the inside of the scout ship. Darkness, alarms, sparks flying. Then, movement. Something fast. Something walking through fire. And then static. The council reviewed the reports in secret. At first they dismissed it. Another upstart species. Another temporary disruption. Nothing the galaxy hadn't seen before. Then came the signals. Every channel all at once. Dozens of systems. No one knew how they got through the encryption. But the voice came clear, rough, strange, with a rhythm that felt unnatural. It spoke no threats. No demands. Just two words. "We're coming." Panic set in slowly. The galaxy was too used to fear to feel it right away. But then came the ships. They didn't arrive in formation. No protocol. No call sign. They just arrived. On the edge of known space, near the abandoned remains of the Drothi hives. Scans showed tech barely above pre-warp. Engines that should have torn themselves apart. Weapons that looked obsolete before they were even fired. But they fought. And they won. Not because of firepower. Not because of numbers. But because they never stopped. They didn't retreat. They didn't negotiate. They didn't blink at loss. Whole ships went up in flames and still others charged forward, using the debris of their comrades as cover. They learned. Fast. Every attack they survived made them better. Stronger. More precise. It was like watching evolution happen in real time, through fire and blood and raw, terrible will. The council tried to make contact. The messages went unanswered. Someone suggested they might be AI. That would explain the lack of hesitation, the emotionless strategy. But then a Maikar ship managed to board one of their vessels. What they found changed everything. They weren't machines. They were human. The word meant nothing at first. Just a name, like any other species. But what lived inside those ships was nothing the galaxy had ever known. Not in all its eons of war. Because humans weren't born from unity. They weren't forged in a peaceful cradle. They were born in chaos. Raised in storms. Every scar in their history was self-inflicted, and they were proud of it. No empire had ever seen that kind of madness before. No species had turned its own planet into a proving ground, where war was sport and struggle was religion. Humans didn't fight because they had to. They fought because it was what they were. They learned to survive not through superiority but stubbornness. And that terrified everyone. Aboard the flagship of the council, the deliberations turned to desperation. "They're not organized," one delegate argued. "Their chain of command is fragmented. We can strike before they form a real fleet." Another, shaking with barely controlled fear, shook her head. "You don't get it. You're thinking like us. Like prey. They're not building an empire. They're not trying to rule. They just want to see who bleeds." Reports began to flood in faster than anyone could contain them. A battalion of Varn assassins failed to eliminate a forward scout team. The scouts didn't even have armor, just grit, blades, and something that looked like pure defiance in their eyes. An ancient Drothi battlecruiser vanished after engaging a small human convoy. Black box data showed something incomprehensible. The humans boarded the ship, from the outside. In suits barely capable of spacewalks. They clung to the hull, punched through it, and fought hand-to-hand in decompressed corridors until the last Drothi signal faded into static. The worst came from the Mycar, a species built for fear. Their minds naturally repelled intrusion, their presence alone caused madness in the weak. But even they recoiled. They didn't fear us, one survivor whispered. We showed them what we are. And they smiled. A silence followed that lasted across systems. The kind of silence that only falls when something undeniable has begun. When history changes mid-sentence. When the old truths die and the new ones are still too raw to name. And then, deep in unclaimed space, a message came through. It wasn't meant for diplomacy. It wasn't intercepted by accident. It was sent on every frequency. Every channel. No encryption. No hiding. A simple video. A man, barely armored, blood on his face, holding a cracked helmet in his hands. His voice was calm. Almost kind. Behind him, smoke curled through a broken sky. He looked tired. Not defeated. Just tired. We didn't come here to take anything from you, he said. We didn't come for glory. Or territory. Or revenge. He paused. Looked off camera for a moment. Something burned behind him. Distant screams echoed like ghosts. We came because we heard what you are. What you've done. To each other. To those weaker than you. And we couldn't stay away. He smiled just barely. We're not monsters. We're worse. We're the ones who ran out of monsters to fight back home. So now we're looking for new ones. The screen cut to black. For the first time in millennia, the council was silent. Even the Mycar withdrew their minds. Even the Varn shut off their sensors. The galaxy had always been afraid of what came next. And now it knew. On a small moon drifting at the edge of neutral space, a research facility stood hidden beneath layers of rock and shielding. Officially, it didn't exist. Unofficially, it had just made first contact, with one of them. He'd been found half dead in the wreckage of a downed transport. No ID. No insignia. Just scars, broken bones, and eyes that wouldn't close, even in sleep. Dr. Veer, a xenopsychologist, leaned forward over the glass partition. Her breath fogged the surface. She didn't speak. Neither did he. But his gaze never left her. The room was filled with monitoring equipment, energy field dampeners, a dozen layers of security. Still she didn't feel safe. Can you understand me? She asked quietly, voice tight. He blinked once. Then nodded. She tried again. Where are you from? Silence. She checked her tablet. Heart rate, stable. Breathing, slow. Too slow. You survived a crash that should have killed you. You've been in a coma for 3 days. We scanned your brain. She hesitated. It's not like anything we've seen. His lips moved. She leaned in. You're not ready? She froze. What? He looked straight into her eyes and this time she felt it. Not violence. Not hatred. Something deeper. Pity. You think we're the storm, he said, voice low and dry. But the storm's behind us. We're just the first drop. Then the lights flickered. Alarms blared. And far above, in the cold silence of orbit, sensors detected something impossible. They hadn't come alone. And the real storm was just arriving. The lights in the facility didn't just flicker. They dropped completely. Power went out like someone had snapped their fingers and everything fell into darkness. No hum of backup generators. No glow from the emergency lights. Just silence. And him. Dr. Veer stumbled backward, her hand shaking as she fumbled for the communicator on her wrist. It was dead. Everything was dead. Across the glass, the human stood up. He hadn't moved in days. His muscles should have been weak, his legs barely able to hold weight. But now he stood tall, steady, his breath calm. There was no fear in his eyes. Only purpose. She backed into the far wall, heart hammering. Security, she whispered, voice dry and useless. Security. No one answered. No sound from the corridors. No footfalls. Just the cold hum of a presence she couldn't explain. The human placed one hand against the glass. His palm was bruised, calloused, still healing. But the pressure he applied was unmistakable. A small vibration echoed through the wall, subtle but sharp. He wasn't threatening her. He didn't need to. He was just reminding her that he could. Then, without a word, he sat back down on the floor. cross-legged. Calm again. Eyes half closed like he was waiting. The lights snapped back on. Power returned to the consoles. The communicator chirped. Dr. Veer gasped as life flooded back into the room. "Doctor, are you safe?" came a voice over the line. "We lost you for 63 seconds. She looked back at the human. He was still watching her. Still sitting there. As if none of it had happened. "Patch me through to command," she said. Now. Across the galaxy, that same 63 seconds played out in dozens of systems. Defense grids went blind. Communication satellites glitched. Automated ships paused mid-maneuver. All recovered. All went back to normal. But no one believed it was a coincidence. High-ranking officials whispered behind closed doors. Scientists reran data until their eyes bled. Fleet commanders demanded answers their subordinates didn't have. And across every conversation, one word began to circulate, quietly at first, then with increasing weight. Humans. Not invaders. Not conquerors. Just humans. And none of the rules applied to them. No one knew where they came from. No world claimed them. No archives mentioned them. It was like they skipped all the steps, emerged from nowhere and went straight for the stars. Some suggested they were a failed species that clawed their way out of extinction. Others thought they were survivors of a dead galaxy. There were even rumors, wild and proven ones, that they'd existed once before long ago, and burned themselves into dust before crawling out of their own grave. But the real answer? No one knew. And that terrified everyone more than any weapon. In orbit above the neutral moon, a Council recon ship drifted silently, hidden behind an asteroid belt. Inside, Commander Serac stood at the viewport, watching the facility below through a live visual feed. His skin, metallic blue smooth, twitched with unease. "They're waking up faster than expected," said his second, a thin creature with 4 eyes and twitching hands. "He should still be sedated." Serac said nothing. He'd seen the data. Seen the footage. Even through the distortion, the image of those humans moving through fire stayed with him. Not walking. Not running. Advancing. Like they were pulled forward by something stronger than instinct. Something colder than strategy. "Send a probe down," Serac said at last. "I want a full scan of the facility. Life signs, power sources, structural integrity." The second hesitated. "Sir, if they detect us." "Send it." The probe launched silently. It was cloaked, micro-sized, virtually undetectable. It threaded its way through the atmosphere like a whisper, dodging sensor arrays and slipping through an old ventilation shaft at the edge of the compound. Then it stopped transmitting. No explosion. No alert. No damage. It just vanished. Serac's jaw clenched. "They didn't destroy it," his second whispered. "They just turned it off." "Worse," Serac replied. "They knew it was there." Below in the facility, the human still hadn't moved. He sat perfectly still in the containment room. But now something had changed. The air itself felt heavier. The temperature control systems were working, yet the walls had a sheen of condensation. The lights flickered just a little too often. And in her private observation chamber, Dr. Veer began to question everything. She hadn't joined the xenopsychology program to study war. She joined to understand connection. To bridge gaps between species. To prove that even in a galaxy built on fear, communication was still possible. But this man, this human, had not once tried to talk. And still he understood everything. She pulled up the latest medical scans. Brain activity spiked across areas that shouldn't have even lit up under stress. His neural patterns were chaotic, dense, shifting faster than her systems could chart. The medical AI flagged the data as corrupted. But it wasn't corrupted. It was just too human. Another alert popped up. Heart rate, steady. Oxygen levels, perfect. Muscle density, increasing. She froze at that one. How could it be increasing? He hadn't eaten. Hadn't moved. Hadn't been exposed to any regenerative tech. But somehow his body was growing stronger. She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she did something no protocol allowed. She unlocked the door. The seal released with a hiss. A single step carried her into the room, and the silence that followed pressed down on her like gravity. He didn't look at her. Didn't need to. "I had to see it for myself," she said quietly. His voice was softer this time. "What are you hoping to find?" She swallowed. "Answers." "That's not what you're afraid of." She hesitated. "No. You're afraid I'll give you one you understand." That cut through her more than she expected. The truth of it rang in her bones. She didn't fear the unknown. She feared what happened when the unknown started making sense. You said there's more coming, she whispered. He nodded. We were never meant to be first. We're just the ones who arrived early. She stepped closer, heartbeat pounding. Who's coming next? He looked up at her. And for the first time she saw it. Not rage. Not madness. Grief. We are. Then the alarms triggered again. This time they weren't false. Above the moon, ships bled into real space, fast, sharp, aggressive shapes that defied identification. Not Council, not Varn, not Mykar. Human. They didn't broadcast any identification. No distress call. No declaration of war. Just coordinates. And movement. Commander Serac stared in horror as the sensor array filled with them. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Moving in coordinated chaos as if strategy was just instinct now. He turned to his second, but the words didn't come. Because one of the human ships broke formation. It dove directly toward the recon ship. There was no time for shields. No time for maneuvering. The ship didn't even fire. It just accelerated, silent, unwavering, impossible to stop. Impact. Light. Noise. Silence. Serac's last thought wasn't of fear. It was of awe. Inside the facility, the shockwave hit a few seconds later. Dust trickled from the ceiling. Power surged, then stabilized. The human in the observation room stood once more. Dr. Veer didn't stop him. What do they want? She asked, voice breaking. Why are they here? He walked to the glass again. His eyes were darker now. Not in color but in depth. Like he was carrying the weight of something that no longer had a name. We wanted to be part of something bigger, he said. To learn. To share. But everywhere we went there was only fear. And lies. And rules made by people who never bled for them. She nodded slowly, her mind racing. So you burned it all down? He didn't smile. But something in his face shifted. An old sadness born from something older than this war. We didn't start the fire. We just stopped running from it. The doors to the facility shook. Not from force but from a signal. Access codes. Human codes. Veer looked at the display. The lock was being bypassed step by step in perfect rhythm. No brute force. No hacking. Just knowledge. They're already inside, she said aloud, not sure if she was speaking to him or herself. He turned to her. No, he said. You are. And then, as if those words were the key, the lights dimmed again, not in failure but in intention. Something larger than the facility. Larger than the war. Larger than any of them. The beginning hadn't started with the first shot fired. It had started long ago. Before anyone noticed. In whispers. In legends. In the kind of stories people told their children just to make them brave enough to sleep. But now those stories had stepped into the light. And they were wearing human skin. The air inside the facility was thick now. Not just heavy, but charged like it was holding its breath. The lights didn't go out this time. They dimmed to a deep amber glow, pulsing faintly like a slow heartbeat. The hum of machines was gone. Even the automated drones had backed into corners and gone still, like prey sensing a storm that hadn't touched the ground yet. Dr. Veer stood at the center of it all, surrounded by silence, but she wasn't alone. The human was still beside her. But there were others now. First one. Then another. Then more. They stepped out from behind storage units, from locked containment chambers, from empty corridors that should have been sealed. Some looked half-starved. Some wore torn uniforms from other facilities. But all of them had the same look in their eyes. They weren't confused. They weren't afraid. They were remembering who they were. None of them spoke. No orders were given. But somehow they all moved with purpose, like they were tuned into something Veer couldn't hear. She felt her hands tremble. Not because they were armed, they weren't. Not because they were violent, they hadn't raised a hand. But because they had stopped pretending to be broken. What do you want from us? She whispered. One of them, a man with blood still caked along his temple, looked at her with quiet grief. We wanted peace, he said. We asked for it. And they laughed, another added voice low. You feared what you didn't understand, said the one beside her. So you locked us in boxes. Poked us. Scanned us. Measured our fear like it was fuel. You could have explained, Veer tried to say. But the first man shook his head. We did. And she knew in her gut they had. But no one had listened. Because the galaxy had already decided who humans were supposed to be. Too emotional, too unpredictable, too wild to be part of anything civilized. Easier to study. Safer to cage. Now the cages were open. A soft alarm buzzed through the floor, barely audible. Veer recognized the tone. External breach. Upper levels. Then another. And another. They were inside. Not just the humans in the room. All of them. Across the facility, doors hissed open and stayed that way. Hallways that once looped in endless circles realigned themselves into straight paths. Lights blinked in patterns, signals Veer couldn't read but the humans clearly did. They moved faster now, not running but never hesitating. And still not one had touched a weapon. Outside, above the facility, ships broke through the clouds. Dark, angular silhouettes. Human vessels, unmarked, without transponders. No demands. No warnings. They didn't need to fire. Not yet. Because the threat wasn't from their weapons. It was from the silence that followed them. Back in orbit, the remaining Council ships scrambled for position. Sirac's replacement, Commander Helen, watched the swarm descend and ordered a full lockdown of surrounding systems. But the commands were too slow. Too rigid. The humans were already inside their networks. Stations went quiet. Fleet movements froze. Communications jammed without jamming. As if reality itself was being bent slightly around them. Some called it impossible. Others called it war. But no one called it mercy. Inside the command bunker of the facility, Veer's voice echoed through the empty halls as she followed the group of humans deeper into the structure. "We can fix this," she said. "Whatever was done, whatever you've seen, we can make it right." The human ahead of her didn't slow down. "You still think this is about revenge?" She stopped. "Isn't it?" He turned to her. "It's about the choice you made when you were afraid. That moment. That's what built this. We were scared. So were we." The silence between them wasn't cold, it was full of something heavier than anger. Regret. One of the humans ahead lifted a panel on the wall, revealing a hidden interface. No lights. No symbols. Just a blank surface. He placed his hand on it. The wall shifted. Metal panels retracted with a deep groan. The corridor beyond was nothing like the rest of the facility. It was older. Built in a different style. Human. Veer's mouth opened slightly in disbelief. "This wasn't constructed by the Council," she said. "No," the man beside her replied. "It was built before you ever knew we were here." "But why? How?" "We left something behind," he said quietly. "Before we disappeared the first time." Veer stared into the dark corridor. "This place is ancient. So are we." The corridor led into a deep chamber, circular with walls covered in dormant tech. Symbols no one had ever decoded. But the humans weren't confused. They walked like they belonged there. Like this was home. At the center of the room was a massive pedestal. Cold, smooth metal. No buttons. No ports. The lead human approached it, paused, then looked back at the others. They all nodded. As one, they placed their hands onto the pedestal. The hum returned. Not from machines, but from somewhere deeper. A low vibration that echoed in Veer's bones. The air shimmered. Lights reactivated in a pattern, blooming across the chamber like a heartbeat returning. A projection lit up above the pedestal. Not an image. A presence. It looked like a human, but older. Not in age, in design. Raw. Unfiltered. It spoke in a voice that wasn't heard through ears. It was heard through memory. "You have awakened the threshold," it said. "You are not alone." Veer fell back a step. "What is that?" "It's us," the lead human answered. Before the fall. The projection turned slowly, scanning the chamber. Its eyes locked on Veer. "You carry their fear," it said to her. She shook her head. "I didn't." "You carry it. But you do not own it." The projection dimmed slightly as if watching more than speaking. "They silenced our voice once. But now they have made it louder." "What is this chamber?" Veer asked. The lead human looked at her, and there was no pride in his voice. "Only wait. It's a warning." She swallowed. "A warning to who?" "To anyone who forgot that fear and respect aren't the same thing." The facility shook again. This time it wasn't from above. It was from below. Pressure systems spiked. Containment alarms flared to life. Not red. Not yellow. White. Veer had never seen a white alert before. She turned to the control panel, tapped it instinctively. Buried beneath the structure, something had woken up. Something massive. Something not listed in any records. The scans couldn't define it. Just showed distortion. A void where data should be. One of the humans stepped forward. They buried it because they feared what it could become. And now, it's listening again. Outside, in orbit, the human ships began to form a ring around the moon. Not tight, but deliberate. A shape. A signal. Inside the facility, more systems activated. Dr. Veer backed away as the wall shifted again, revealing more human designs beneath the surface. layers of a truth no one wanted to admit. Her communicator crackled to life. "This is command," the voice said. "We are initiating full planetary lockdown. Evac all personnel. Repeat, evacuate." She stared at it, then shut it off. No one here was leaving. Not yet. The projection above the pedestal flickered. "You are near the threshold," it said. "Once crossed, you do not return." The lead human nodded. His voice was quiet. "We know. You accept the cost?" "Yes." The chamber pulsed again. Lights dimmed and returned. The air began to thrum, slow and deep. Then a sound echoed through the floor. Not mechanical. Not artificial. A heartbeat. Veer stared at the humans, dozens of them now, all focused on the center. Not afraid. Not angry. Just steady. "You're not here for war," she said aloud. One of them turned to her. "No. We're here to remember. And if we try to stop you?" He looked away. "Then you'll remember too." Below them, in the void under the moon's surface, the pressure spiked again. Something had shifted. Something impossibly old. Something with human fingerprints, buried and forgotten. Now breathing again. The humans didn't speak. They waited. And the galaxy outside held its breath. Waiting too. The pressure beneath the moon's crust didn't fade, it grew. Every few seconds, the floor vibrated just enough to unsettle Veer's balance. But the humans around her didn't flinch. They stood firm as if this rhythm was familiar, almost welcome. She glanced at the pedestal again, still pulsing with that strange, living light. The ancient projection hovered above it, its presence no longer still. It was watching, shifting, learning. Then something new happened. A quiet hiss. Not from the ceiling or the walls, but from the air itself. A faint distortion moved through the chamber, warping the light for just a moment. Veer turned her head quickly, but it was already gone. The lead human noticed it too. His jaw clenched. "You saw that?" Veer whispered. He nodded slowly. "They're here." She stared at him. "Who?" But his answer didn't come right away. Instead, he stepped away from the pedestal, looking toward the rear wall of the chamber, a wall that hadn't moved since they entered. He pressed his palm against the surface. Nothing happened at first. Then the entire wall simply faded. Behind it was a space unlike the rest of the facility. No smooth council alloy. No neat construction. It was organic. The walls looked grown. Twisting patterns curled into each other like muscle fiber and vine. Something built it long ago, or maybe it was still growing. The air smelled different there. Older. One of the younger humans stepped forward, eyes wide. "I've seen this before, in the dreams." Veer stiffened. "Dreams?" The lead human gave her a glance. "You thought you were the first to find us. You weren't." He led the group into the hidden chamber. Veer followed, her every step uncertain. The room widened as they moved deeper, and soon she saw them. Pods. Dozens. Lined in uneven rows. Each one covered in a thick, semi-transparent film like it was alive. Inside each pod, humans. Not just unconscious. Frozen in mid-thought. As if caught between moments. None were breathing. Yet none had aged. Veer moved closer, one hand trembling as she reached toward the nearest pod. "What are these?" she asked. "Us," the lead human said softly. "Versions that didn't wake up." She stared at him. "What do you mean didn't wake up?" "The council ran more than one experiment," he said. "Not just here. Not just with one group." Veer's throat tightened. "There are more facilities?" He nodded. There were. Most were shut down. Some were lost. "And them?" She pointed toward the pods. "Are they alive?" The young woman who had spoken earlier touched the side of one pod. "They're caught. Between signals. Between thoughts." "The dreaming state," the lead human added. "They were meant to be test cases. Cognitive mapping experiments. How human minds react to prolonged psychic dampening." Veer swallowed hard. "That's forbidden. That violates." The lead human cut her off. "It didn't stop you." He wasn't accusing her personally, but the weight still landed. It was true. Veer hadn't authorized it, hadn't known about it, but that didn't change what had been done here. What had been buried. These weren't just bodies. They were pieces of something bigger. And now something had noticed they were missing. The flickering distortion returned again, brighter this time. A pulse through the chamber, almost like a sonar. Veer winced, but the humans didn't. They just listened. Then came the sound. It didn't come through the walls. It didn't come from below. It came from inside. A voice, ancient and fragmented, speaking in tones no species had used in centuries. But the humans understood. All of them. Their heads turned in unison, and slowly their expressions changed. Not fear. Not awe. Recognition. The lead human looked at Veer, and for the first time his voice shook slightly. They found us. Who? Veer asked again, louder this time. He held her gaze. The ones who feared us first. Before the council. Before the experiments. Before the silence. Veer's mind reeled. You're saying there's something else out there? Something older than the council? More dangerous. He nodded. They didn't destroy us. They couldn't. So they buried us instead. Veer's voice dropped. And now? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The chamber pulsed again, and this time the pods responded. One by one they lit from within. Faint glows appeared behind each sleeping human's eyes. The dreaming minds were being stirred. Or worse, reached. They're trying to control them, said the young woman, stepping back. They're waking the wrong way. No, the lead human said firmly. They're being called. Another distortion swept the room, this one stronger, almost physical. Veer stumbled, bracing herself on the edge of the nearest pod. What's happening? She cried. The lead human clenched his fists. They're pulling them into the signal. You have to stop it. He didn't move. I can't, he said. No one can. The pedestal's projection flickered wildly now, its form glitching between different versions of itself. Male, female, young, old, all human. It spoke in a voice layered with echoes. Divergence point reached. Threshold approach unstable. External force detected. Then it paused. And for the first time it sounded afraid. Hostile resonance confirmed. They are listening again. The pods began to tremble. Veer's heart raced as one of the humans inside twitched. Then another. Their faces contorted, not in pain but like they were hearing something too loud, too deep to process. The young woman turned to the others. If they break through. They won't, said the lead. She stared at him. You don't know that. I do. And that's when the second twist hit. A ripple passed through the chamber, like space itself had bent for a heartbeat. Then silence. Not the quiet of pause. The quiet of absence. Every pod went dark. The pedestal shut off. The humans froze in place, staring at nothing. Veer panicked. What is it? What did they do? One of the humans finally answered, but his voice wasn't his own. They're here. Veer took a step back. His eyes were glowing faintly. His voice was distorted. Deeper. The first ones. The silenced gods. The ones who watched from the edge when your kind built cities in the void. You thought we left. But we only slept. The voice turned toward Veer. You woke them. No, she breathed. We didn't know. You dug for secrets you couldn't understand. And now you've touched the threshold. The glowing eyes faded. The human collapsed to one knee, gasping. The others rushed to help him. Veer turned to the lead human. What was that? A warning, he said, voice low. They've returned to finish what they started. And us. His stare was hard. We're the key they couldn't erase. She felt her mouth go dry. All this time, you weren't hiding from us, she whispered. You were hiding them from the galaxy. He nodded. Now the galaxy gets to choose. She stared at him. Choose what? To stand beside us. Or against you? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because above the moon, far beyond orbit, something had just arrived. It didn't announce itself. It didn't jam sensors. It didn't break laws of physics. It ignored them. An object the size of a station, cloaked in a blackness so pure that even starlight refused to touch it. It didn't move. It didn't spin. It waited. And every human, on the moon, on the ships, in orbit, felt it. Veer looked up, though there was nothing to see through the walls. But she felt it too. Like something was leaning in. Listening. The humans turned slowly toward the chamber exit. We have to finish the sequence, one of them said. Veer followed. Why? She asked. What happens if you don't? The lead human didn't slow down. They win. The corridors changed as they moved. The walls realigned, revealing paths that hadn't been accessible in decades. This facility wasn't a lab. It was a vault. And it was waking up. Deeper inside, the last chamber waited. Veer didn't know what was in it. But every step felt like crossing into something no species was ever meant to touch. The hum grew louder again. And beneath her skin, the air felt like it was remembering something long buried. Something human. Something dangerous. Something sacred. They reached the final door. The lead human placed his hand on the reader. He looked at Veer one last time. This isn't revenge, he said. It's legacy. And then the door began to open. The light inside wasn't warm. It was final. And behind that light was the end of silence. The door opened slowly, not with a mechanical hiss, but like something ancient had been holding its breath. A dense fog spilled into the corridor, thick and cold. The humans didn't hesitate. They stepped into the chamber, their faces lit not just by the glow ahead, but by something deeper. A sense of returning. Veer hesitated at the threshold. Every instinct screamed at her to stop, to turn back, to seal the door and forget all of it. But she followed. Not because she wasn't afraid, because she was. But even fear wasn't stronger than the need to understand what had been hidden for so long. Inside, the space widened into something vast, too large for the moon's crust. This room had been bent into reality, folded from something that didn't follow natural rules. The walls pulsed like distant memories. At the center stood a structure that hummed with impossible energy, half machine, half thought. It was a throne. But it wasn't built for a ruler. It was a signal seat. The lead human stepped forward. He turned to the others. Now. They took positions around the chamber, each touching the edge of the structure, forming a silent circuit. Energy rippled out, and suddenly their bodies lit from within, each pulse syncing perfectly with the throne. Veer watched wide-eyed. What are you doing? We're finishing the call, the lead human said, voice tight. The message was never meant to be stopped. You buried it. You feared what it meant. But it was never meant to destroy. The wall shimmered. What was it meant to do? She asked. Awaken us. The chamber darkened. A pressure grew heavy and real. Outside, the dark object in orbit moved for the first time. Not fast. Not loud. It just shifted, *aware*, now that the signal had resumed. The pedestal in the earlier room lit back up across the facility, echoing the pulse. And the frozen humans in the pods? They began to stir. Not all at once. Not violently. But gradually. Peacefully. The trapped minds were being freed. Veer looked around, confused. They're waking up, but the signal, it's calling something here. Yes, said the lead human, sweat on his brow. But not everything that arrives wants to destroy. The object outside pulsed once. A single black wave rolled across space, and every council ship in orbit shut down. No weapons. No engines. Just silence. Panic erupted on the comms. Veer pressed her ear. Comms, stand down, do not engage. Do not fire. She didn't know if they heard her. She didn't know if it mattered. Because something larger had taken control. The black object unfolded slightly, like a flower in slow motion. And from its center, light emerged, not cold, not dark, but human. Memories, faces, laughter, or peace. A billion voices overlapping into one long, aching sound. A reminder. Veer stared at it, stunned. What is that? A message we left ourselves, the lead human said. In case we forgot. The signal chair lit fully. The chamber around them shook, but not from attack. From release. The humans standing in the circle looked up, tears in their eyes. It's working, one whispered. Then, for a brief moment, every human across the facility, those awake, those frozen, those in orbit, remembered star. Not just history. But everything. The fear they had faced before the council came. The reason they buried their minds and dreams. The thing that chased them into the void, and the reason it stopped. The truth. Humanity wasn't just running. They chose to forget. Because they had built something so powerful, so complete, it scared even them. A sentient signal, a legacy they feared would be corrupted. So they scattered. They erased. They left breadcrumbs behind for when the species was ready again. Now the breadcrumbs had been found. The signal chair glowed blindingly bright, and then dimmed. The humans fell silent. The one in the center stood alone now. The others had collapsed, breathing but unconscious. Veer rushed to him. What happened? She asked, grabbing his shoulders. He looked up. His eyes were glowing faintly but not like before. They were warm. They chose, he said softly. Who chose? Veer asked. All of us, he replied. Every mind connected to the signal. Across time. Across space. We gave consent to remember. Outside, the black object shifted again, and this time it shrank. Folded inward. And vanished. Just like that. No destruction. No attack. Veer didn't understand. Why did it leave? Because we passed the test, he said. What test? He looked at her, tired but smiling. Whether we were still afraid of ourselves. She stared at him. And for a moment it was enough. The signal faded gently from the throne. The chamber cooled. The pods in the other room were empty now, Every sleeper awake, dazed but alive. Council fleets reported full system restoration. No losses. No attack. But the real twist wasn't what had left. It was what remained. As the lead human stumbled from the signal chair, he reached into a small crevice beneath the structure, something the light had revealed only to him. Inside was a single crystalline data shard. He turned it over in his hand. "What is it?" Veer asked. He didn't answer right away. Then he looked at her. "This wasn't the only signal," he said. Her blood turned cold. "What?" "This was just the one we left behind in case we forgot. But there are others." He stood fully. This was a warning. The others might not be. Outside the moon, nothing stirred. But far beyond, in the edge of charted space, quiet systems began to flicker. Old ones. Forgotten ones. Something had noticed. And this time it wasn't a memory. It was waking up.